Well, you never know what another 24 hours is going to do, but Scott Walter, you have had a week that you can never ever duplicate again. You must have like overload at this point in terms of what's going on with your with the incoming for you. So talk to me about the Optimus video that just broke. Holy mackerel, fantastic from what I can tell.
Yeah, so I think this is the video we were hoping to see for maybe 2 months now. They were
Yeah,
kind of promised an update, and I think it was put on hold for the We Robot event. And the We Robot event was way more future looking, what the possibilities that are there. So you couldn't really glean very much about the Optimus, status. And this was like the video that I was hoping to see at We Robot, but I understand that that wasn't the appropriate venue for it for nerds
right.
like me. And so a couple days later, it kind of comes up. And I think it helps answer some of the questions we had over We Robot and what was done and what the capabilities are.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's an interesting update because it's more of really what the state is, what they're planning on doing. I think they're still maybe holding back on some of the things and they're not giving all the details. There's no reason for them to give away the candy store. So they're kind of just showing enough of this to see the state of the progress and where it's going to be going and the capabilities. Um, so do you have any questions before we go ahead and start to play the video?
I think my whole question. I'm sorry to be so practical, but you I know are practical also because this is your career. But it was for 30 years. That's what I did. Well, actually, my entire career I was in some form of warehousing, wholesaling, buying and selling and owning warehouses. So the ideas that are here, they seem to be so realizable. I've
Mhm.
thought so for a long time, but when you look at this video, it just seems like I don't know what we're waiting for to put some of these into actual use, but maybe you'll explain that as we go along, what's still needed to make these something that could be sold.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the overall packaging. So right now, there's still a lot of training that has to be done. A lot of the training is done telerobotically, as one way of grab the data and to be able to demonstrate things. And I don't think that is a scalable solution. That the users are not going to want to have a telerobotic outfit that they had to put on to be able to teach Optimus to do a particular task. So at some point, the foundation model is going to be good enough and strong enough that the training is going to be monkey see, monkey do.
I see. Hmm.
Simple as that. It's
Uh-huh.
like no robotics kit, nothing else like that. Um, and so you're kind of in that transition phase where you're along there. So with any product to be ready, you need to make sure it has a really good user experience and that users aren't going to be frustrated and doing wrong things. And there's also safety considerations. And the other is it's just like scaling up is like how scalable is this particular design? Is it really
Mm.
designed for manufacturing? I think they could probably pump out a lot, but it looks like they're not ready to commit on that because they don't think it's the one they want to have. It's probably going to be either the Gen 4 or the Gen 3.5, whatever you want to call it. So there's going to be a major change. There was an evolutionary change between 1 and 2. You could see that they're basically the same, it was just better packaged.
Hmm.
3 is probably going to be completely different. You have a really hard time recognizing anything coming from the first 2 generations. We talked about the other day that the wrist mechanism. I made a little animation of that. That's
Right.
that's important to look at of like the change that they made in that. So you might be able to say, aha, you see, that's something that comes from Gen. But that hand, the rest of the hand doesn't come from Gen 1, Gen 2, not with all those tendons. And if that's going to be happening throughout, it may be almost unrecognizable. And then that's going to be sort of the first generation of a completely new platform, which means it's not ready for scalability. It's got to go
Mm.
out, it's got to get battle tested, which it will in the factories.
Right.
And they may have made it so that they can scale it up because it sounds like they would like to have in the order of thousands of these things.
Right.
Because not just for training, but really reliability, durability, just to see how well it works. It's just
Mhm.
push it to its limits. And then when that you kind of go through that, then you would start to scale up. So in many ways, it's exactly what we see when any product that Tesla comes out with. We see it, then it takes a while for refinement, and then there's like they make a bunch of them, and everyone keeps on like looking. It's like, look, we saw another Cybertruck out here, and this and that, and it's because they're doing road testing that they have to do, a lot of compliance testing, crash testing, all this other stuff. So the same thing is going to happen is they're going to build a bunch of bots, and they're going to break them, and then learn from that, and then finally make the refinements, and eventually they'll scale. But the idea that that event doesn't happen until probably sometime in 2026 that you get the big scaling, and at that point, so I'm assuming it's either called version 3.5 or
Right.
or generation 4 or something like that, that they will be ready for that, and
They
that will
did.
also give the AI enough time to mature.
They did mention in a follow-up from one of the engineers on X today that it now has the capability of lifting 11 kilograms without overheating.
Yeah, without overheating. That's actually in that update. So
Right.
it's all in there, and we can take a look at
Okay.
that. Yeah. So if we want, I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll
Sure.
try our best voiceover and everything here.
Okay.
So and let me get the right control. And of course, I just hit the wrong button here to get. Let's see. Let me get that. Oh, that's where the share screen is. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen too. Yeah. Okay. So here we are. I think you can see that, right? Which is a
So
blank
far, I
screen right
have
now.
black, but oh yeah, when you turn it
But now
on.
you're going to see it. So here
Ah,
it is.
yes,
So here's
yes.
the video. So Optimus is able to walk a bit more confidently, and we can see it going around, which is probably the battery fab. And ironically, looking at some of the same tasks that Optimus is doing, and that is picking everything up from the tray. And the idea that, and of course, they're always showing where it's being up, where it is, just pause this, when it's autonomous and when it's not autonomous. So everything up till then was kind of showing autonomous movement,
Okay.
and it's mapping the environment. So it's able to go through an environment it's never seen before, which, the Tesla cars can do the same thing, right? You
Sure.
just like, it just knows to stay on the roads, and Optimus just knows, like, probably to stay on some sort of hallway or pathway and not bump into things, what those things are. And it can create the maps that the rest of the fleet will be able to see. So it's
Uh-huh.
shared by all the other optimized. So that's just one. They're all going through there. This is not LiDAR. This is using a vision-based approach where they're able to build up their map, which is probably some kind of voxel-based map or something similar to that, where I'm sure they're identifying somehow those objects which are static versus those which are dynamic and moving.
Uh-huh.
And as they go around, and we'll see a little bit of how does it capture. You may have seen like a lot of this, and a lot of phones will do the same thing like this as well, that allow you to do splicing between different images and put them together, because they're trying to find common points, common edges and intersections that can say, oh, that maps to this picture I saw over here. Let's map them on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
This analogy that I've used, it's like celestial navigation. Basically, make a star chart of all these different points and constellations that they can recognize. So when they see it coming from somewhere else, they say, oh, I recognize that group of points, so I kind of know where I am. They can use it for referencing. And from it, you can build up a very large world model that all the others are able to reference and move off of when you just start to see these common points. So usually the points are created by intersections of different edges that are in the image.
So this is
So that's
so the idea is here is whether it was a warehouse, a manufacturing facility, retail, or a person's
because
home.
they don't have GPS in there.
Right. They would be able
So
to go
they can't pick
in.
the. Now there are ways of doing, like, I think some weird repeaters in some places, that in indoor spaces you can create something that would allow you to do the
Right.
navigation,
Right.
but that means someone has to set that up. And the idea is like, look, we don't want to have to rely on GPS when we're going to, some place that doesn't have a repeater or something like that will allow us to actually know our location. So we're going to do it visually based on all these different landmarks that we see. And as we go around, we know where they are for future reference.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of one idea. And again, them being able to build up that entire map. And then I think right after this, it gets okay. So as a result of that, right over here on the right side, behind the column, is that the famous sort of image or video where it's taking the batteries off the line and putting them into
Right.
a little pallet. In this case, Optimus, you see it's in red. State of charge is kind of low.
Oh.
So it needs to come over and come to the charging station. Now it knows where the charging station is, but it has to do, I guess, rear end parking here. All right.
Yeah. Right.
Which we all know we're pretty bad, but it can do it autonomously. So I guess you can say Optimus has ass. so it's able to go ahead and go into its parking space. And so you'll see, and I'm just going to go back a couple of frames here. That sticking right up here is basically the charging port.
Mhm.
And underneath the Optimus's back along the spine, there's also a receptacle for that to be able to go in. And the thing for you to notice is that it can also be used to kind of help hang Optimus on that. So it goes on there and doesn't just plug in, but it also probably allows it to be kind of suspended.
Oh, okay.
I'm assuming, maybe it means it can power down the motors, or maybe it does just a little bit, but
Uh-huh.
it might be it's able to suspend right off it. Now it comes back and it's got kind of the white lighting around there, which means everything's a go.
Oh, okay.
And it probably turned to green when, it's like charging is complete. So you can go ahead and come back. So this is important because CERN and I did a modeling of how you would be able to keep these bots going 20 or 22 hours.
Right.
And the trick to doing it is getting charging every now and then that you try to time around the normal break schedules.
Right.
So the factories are still shutting down every couple of hours for people to take a break or slowing down or something like that. And so if you just go over there and give a little bit of a charge, that could be enough to make sure, I've got enough to make it to lunch, and lunch is a long break and I can get a really long charge, and you keep on doing that. So you see it's close and easy and doesn't take long. So
Right.
it's not like it's 5 minutes to get over to the charging station, 5 minutes to get back. It's just ready to go, because that charging station is really not very intrusive. Just mount it on a wall using standard power that you got in the factory. Not a big deal.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we've seen this before, and
Sure.
we saw at the very beginning a human doing almost the exact same task with the same hands. It's a question of whether that's like some sort of Easter egg, or that's how actually everyone is taking the battery cells off the line, as they just doing a right hand grip and bringing it down again.
Yeah.
Which is more efficient than trying to do a hand. I mean, you think about it, could grab it with the left hand, that's slower than just going ahead and doing one straight shot on there. Now, because Optimus has to do multiple tasks, it's not just an arm taking batteries off the line.
Right.
So if it was just about having something to take the battery off that, we could build a cobotic arm or something like that that could go in and do it. And the cost of that arm, the engineering of that thing, would probably be more than the cost of the Optimus to begin with, because you probably have to have safety fencing and all these other things in there, programming, and it just does one task. So it looks like when you're taking the battery off, you're not using all the capabilities of Optimus. But there's another part to the task, and that is, once it's full, what happens to the container? Well, we've got to remove the container off somewhere else.
Sure.
So it has to lift it up. And this is where that 11 kilograms comes in. And that, I think, is around 25 pounds,
Right.
something like that. So it's picking up something at 25 pounds. This is something I mentioned to Herbert, is that, look at that tote that you have there. And it does have like a little lip around it, but that's not sticking out very much. What, maybe half an inch or something like that? And look how Optimus grabs that. So, Randy, would you be comfortable carrying a tray that weighed 25 pounds where you just had your fingertips in there kind of holding it? Like
Yeah. Generally,
now,
you wouldn't do it that way.
you would find that rather difficult, because you have to apply a lot of pressure on both sides. That is, your fingers, it would be a lot easier to get your hand underneath it and just kind of lifting up that way, and it wouldn't slip very much.
Right.
So we could say that's not the way to grip it. It's got to learn to do something. But at the same time, the force is required there on the fingertips. That's a lot of force on those fingertips. That means that hand is able to apply a fairly good amount of force. Right. As well as the rest of the body, because both sides have to also be pushing that thing together to make sure they don't slip out when you decide to take this rather heavy object.
Right.
And then just kind of walk it over here. And I guess this is also where you can carry it around without overheating. So, your biggest concern is that you do these difficult tasks and, your batteries start overheating, or your motors. So they are really making sure the power consumption isn't too high. So I think their maximum might be around 500 watts. So that's what they specified. That's my guess, is probably what they're using to make sure everything is kept within that range. And a lot of it comes down to how good your walking stride is. Is it efficient or is it inefficient? And it's not too bad. I mean, it took just a couple final little steps there that is fewer than other bots that we've seen. Other bots, take a long time for them to get to that last inch.
Right.
This is where, so that's not too bad, and it can still be improved. But overall, you can see how fluid the motion is. Very nice. Something I've been dying to see for the longest time is Optimus actually being able to walk upstairs now. So
And
that
he doesn't grab the rail.
doesn't grab the rail exactly, which is, definitely something that I would do. Um, and this is like an important thing. So there's a lot of questions about the how much teleoperation there was at the We Robot event.
Right.
And so with a certain amount, and I think part of it is there is no grok integration yet, as far as we know for speech or talking. There may be something, but it's probably not complete. But what you're seeing here is something completely autonomous. This is not telerobotically controlled,
Right.
which means their setup is already such that the bot is able to do these actions. Now, the first thing that I just want to kind of go back to what we just saw for a second is they mentioned that they want to make sure that it can react to unsafe behaviors. Okay, so the human wants to do a fist pump right now, and Optimus is like, no, 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 and actually gives him the finger wag, say, not allowed. I'm not allowed to do that. But the most important thing is that it's reading body language. Body language is very universal.
Sure.
It translates into all languages very well. We also know that the Tesla FSD seems to be getting close to that, kind of reading body language and intent of pedestrians when they're walking down the street to tell whether they really are in there. So there's something about, they've already figured out how to kind of read a little bit of human intent. And I imagine you can just take it a little bit further. So it knows it has a particular task, and just based on the point, it's like, oh, okay, sure, you want one of those? I'll go ahead and get you one of those and hand it. Now, the exchange here is rather interesting to watch, and that is how quickly Optimus releases it, almost too soon. I mean, it's like that there is almost as like grabbing the booster at IFT5. It's like this boom, not a whole lot of room for error there, and that seems to release it very quick. Like it almost wants to avoid any sort of human contact as much as possible.
But also you want it to be a smooth handoff. You don't want it to be
something. It's also very quick. It's very quick. But I mean, usually when I hand a bottle to you, I'm gonna wait until I feel a tug.
Right.
And then I'll release. But right there, it was like visual. It's like, oh yeah, I think he's got it.
Yeah.
Or he's about to get it. And it seemed like he had to go down and grab it a little bit. I mean, gravity almost took over there. And then you see the same thing with the chips. Oh, I want chips now. Bring it in. And then kind of grab, and that's just like working perfectly. So this is all autonomous, what we're seeing, which means I suspect the bartending bot that we saw at We Robot was probably more supervised than anything else. So they're being very careful in this kind of setting that the bot's behind the table. People can't get too close. It's on a tether. You have to be very careful that the human interactions are safe. You don't want anything to go wrong there. And then suddenly you decide, well, we're going to put it in a park with 2,500 people just randomly coming up and going around. We need some extra safeguards. And I'm sure, well, you were actually trained as an attorney. The lawyers somehow got involved and go like, wait, you want to do what? And probably it came down to, well, the safe protocol is it's definitely being telerobotically controlled the whole time in case something goes wrong. Right. So I think it was more supervised. Very much like FSD supervised. Sure. It was doing all that stuff. And then every now and then the teleoperator might come in and change something if a behavior was not quite right or it didn't like what was going on. So, and also probably the teleoperator was the voice. Doing the natural language, because the natural language isn't there. Yeah. So there's probably a lot more autonomy going on at We Robot than we were really aware of.
I saw some commentary today with regard to the voice. I didn't have time to really look at it in detail, but there was a couple of thoughts. One was that I guess it was a 10-10, where the voice and the actions stopped and started. In other words, if the voice was speaking, the action stopped, and then when the voice stopped, then the action would continue, almost as if it was two different systems within the brain. One for voice, one for action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I'm pretty sure the voice was just a teleoperator.
Right.
And probably at that point, the teleoperator was like hitting a mic on switch or something like that, and couldn't do something else. And then maybe had to then transition to doing the movement. That's who knows what was there. But Yeah, right here, I just wanted to see that uh, the worker with the red hard hat is doing the exact same thing that Optimus
Oh,
is
I see.
doing
I see. Yeah.
in another station. Just going ahead and putting it down. You can also see that this is a clean room environment.
Mm,
Everyone's wearing the funny shoes, or even wearing face masks, hair nets, everything else, because clearly, with the battery cells and stuff like that, you want to make sure you're not getting any sort of impurities or anything else. It's not, I'm not sure what level clean room it is, but yeah, there's a little bit that they want to make sure. Now, how fast do you think Optimus is walking?
Oh, okay. This is always your area of expertise. You do your analysis. What did you come up with?
Okay, so what I did is I looked at the very opening. So if I just kind of go all the way back here to the very beginning, right here, I go ahead and play this. Optimus is taking 8 steps right there
Okay.
and doing it in about a little bit more than 4 seconds. I put it into Camtasia so I could actually get the accurate reading. So
Okay.
that first clip is 4.8333 seconds. There's 8 steps over there. And if we assume a stride size of about 12 inches,
Oh.
because it looks like it's putting just one foot in front of the other. There's not a big gap. Could
Uh-huh.
be 14 inches, something like that. So just a guesstimate that's in there.
Sure. Sure.
This, plugging that in, this is what you get in inches per second.
Okay.
And then this is what you get in feet per second. So you get almost 20 inches per second to 1.6 feet per second. But the most important thing is in meters, we get 0.5 meters per second, which is about what we've seen before,
Okay.
or a little bit over 1 mile per hour, 1.12 miles per hour. They still need a little bit more than double this.
I
So
got
we
you.
need 1.2 meters per second.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So doubling will get you a little bit closer. And of course, I could be off. It could be 0.6 meters per second here or something like that because I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing on the stride set. I'm pretty sure I is able to count the right number of steps. I'm pretty sure I get the timestamp right. It just kind of comes down to guessing, is that actually a 14-inch stride versus a 12-inch stride? I
Now,
could be wrong. I don't know. Whether Optimus's feet, maybe they're size 8 feet,
yeah. Yeah.
and
What
not 12. So who knows?
practically speaking, how does that impact? I can see where getting it to a regular human gait would make it more human acting, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
you're not distracted by its lack of humanness. But in terms of actually any kind of work, yes, it might take twice as long for it to get from A to B, but where would that impact in terms of a practical?
Well, I think where that comes down is that it it depends how much walking is like an important component of the cycle time.
Right,
In some cases, when we see moving totes back and forth, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're moving totes back and forth.
right, right.
You're not really doing a particular task, and it's a pick up and drop off, and there's nothing else along there. And certainly, you want to make sure it's able to grab the tote reasonably quickly. And
Mhm.
most of them do it fairly well, but
Right,
they obviously can do it a little bit quicker, especially making
right.
sure you get the grip. But what a lot of them are bad is like once they have it, it takes forever to turn around. It's like turning the Titanic. Oh, okay, turn around. Now start heading towards your destination. Then they get there, they slow down, and they shuffle step, and then slowly drop it on that. And then you're like, it's like it's taking forever. So in some cases, the walking speed is not the problem. It's like it's what's happening at both ends because it's so slow to
Right.
kind of get itself going and everything else. And then speeding it up would help reduce it. But overall, you look at that and say it's our turning times that are really slow.
Ah,
It's our
okay.
approaches that are very slow. It's our departures that are really slow because we're so slow backing out where you can finally turn. We're so slow coming in the last couple of steps. It's almost like don't worry about the walking speed. Worry about mastering a very quick movement in and out.
Got it.
Uh, but then there are other operations where, let's say, walking is not that dominant. So in that particular case, you're looking at the overall cycle time of it needs to load the batteries into that tray and then get them over to the next table within a
Sure.
certain amount of time. Well, how much of that is actually walking? Not that much
Right,
compared to like just loading the batteries that are in there.
right.
So if it's a little slow, it might be all right. And if it's within the margins of the cycle time, I don't care if it
Yeah,
walks a little bit slow, as long as it doesn't fall over and drop the batteries.
right. Yeah, and so the walking speed, I think you and I have talked about that a little before, and even the speed of all the other things, turning and
Mm-hmm.
everything else, is partially a function of how much energy it's going to use to do that.
Right,
So,
right, right.
so would this be more in the motors? Would it be more in concern about using battery? I mean,
Probably I think, the motors, even though compute takes a certain amount of energy, um, motors are the things that really drain your batteries really quickly.
right,
Like, I remember as a kid playing with motors and light bulbs, and it seemed like when I put my D cell onto a motor, that thing went dead really a lot faster than compared to just having a light bulb.
right, sure,
And
sure,
now with LEDs, I mean, it's like they
right,
sip almost nothing when it comes to illumination, but electromotive force seems to consume a lot, and we have a long ways to go as far as improving the efficiency of walking and everything else in the bots, because the human body, we're able to walk by only using about 10 watts. So it's like nothing compared to these other things that are using hundreds of watts to be able to go, in some cases, maybe thousands of watts, depending upon the kind of walking machine that you have there. So there can be a lot of efficiencies, improvements to see that, first principle says you can walk in a gate like that for almost nothing,
yeah,
and just figuring out how to improve that. So if they're doing it without overheating, then that must mean that they've figured out a way to be very energy efficient. Of course, they've got fans and everything else. They've designed it in a way to be able to dissipate the heat if they want it as quickly. But the best way to not overheat is not to have better fans, but just not to overheat in the first place.
right. More efficient motors. So,
Yeah, and remember, fans are motors too.
that's right. That's another one. That's right. So the other thing, some folks, of course, have wheels, but I've also seen one bot that has regular feet, but just like humans, has the ability to change that foot into a skate,
Mm-hmm.
uh, into a roller skate. What about that? What about
I'm see, somehow I'm not a big fan of the roller skates because they have really small wheels, and sometimes they make you stumble over just as much as possible. What I do think is interesting is what they did over ETH and has been copied by several other Chinese manufacturers in Unitree. I think Limix or another is like showing a similar type of thing that you basically can change your feet to a wheel,
change?
and the wheel is about this. It's not a bicycle size wheel, and it's not like a tiny caster. It's about the size of a wheel that you would see on a baby pram, not a normal stroller, but
Yeah.
one of the more fancy ones. So it's maybe about that big. It's like the perfect size wheel because it's more or less a foot that can rotate. Because if you lock the wheel, you're basically saying this wheel, this tire is just acting like shoes right now. And you can walk on it because it's not rotating. So you just
Right.
lock it in there, and they can walk up steps and do whatever else they want, or they can roll up the steps. So
Right.
just about the right size to go upstairs, as opposed to like big bicycle wheel or a wheelchair. The wheel is just way too big for it to be able to stairs and everything else. You need to have ramps. So if you make it smaller, it's all right. And then when it's on a flat surface, and if it needs to cover ground really quick, it just goes. And then when it needs to like go into walking mode, locks those things down. Unlike like a roller skate, it's like the wheels are just always freely spinning, and you're just kind of afraid of fall. And if you look at that, it's like that's almost the way to go. That rather than having roller skates, I would just make the decision: are my feet, are my shoes basically just going to be a medium-sized wheel? And then it seems like it works. And then you look at these things are climbing, they're jumping up. It's like really makes you think about the difference between wheeled and bipedalism, and that might be the hybrid in between the two. They end up seeing it a little bit more like that. If they were to take that approach, I'm not sure if everyone's convinced on that. Everyone just wants to go to normal bipedalism just to see how they can do it with normal feet. And I'm not sure, maybe it's because they don't want the skid marks and stuff like that, and everything else that kind of goes along with it. Right size wheel might, maybe, again, just think of it as like it's a shoe that happens to be shaped like a circle. That's all.
So that I've always said that I want one of these robots because I want it to be able to give me a shoulder massage and a back massage.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I was just, moving around the internet the other day, and I ran across this unit that's already available, and it's, got regular, I always forget the name of them, these massive arms. What do they call those? The really big robots in the factories.
Oh, like the industrial robot arms,
Like an industrial
just like
robot.
the Fennec arm or Kuka arms.
Right, right. And so it's these very large arms with very nice hands, or kind of rollers and whatnot on the end. and they map your body, and then they and then they teach it how to do you. You know, you tell it exactly what you want, and it learns that and remembers how to do that. And it's only like 60 or 80 bucks to go in and have this bot do your massage. So it brings up to me the whole question of less than other objects getting the AI treatment that the
Mhm.
humanoids are going to have, but that are smaller in scale, only having those parts that they need in order to do, a job like that.
Yeah, and so that becomes a form of specialization that does that and only that job and can't do anything else. Which means to get the most utility out of it, you have to make sure there's a lot of people using it,
Right.
and it's not something you would want to have in your house where you're just using it, you know, less than an hour a day or something like that. How much time is it? But then we have plenty of objects like that in our houses already, like
Yeah, don't we?
mixers and toasters and stuff like that that sit around unused for a while
Right, right.
until you actually need it. But that seems like a more complex piece of equipment that you like to get more utility out of it. And again, well, we just talked about what Optimus is doing there, loading the batteries in there. We could have come up with a piece of automation, a robot arm that go in there that would do just that, just take the batteries off and put it on in there. The thing is, that thing would not then take it off
Right,
the table and bring it on over somewhere else.
right.
The other thing is that we don't know whether that's like a 24/7 kind of operation there, or whether that's something that only, every now and then they have to do it because they
Right.
have a batch of batteries that come through and say, oh, now it's time for you to pull these things off. And now you got nothing to do. And if you've got nothing to do, well, we can find another task for you to do in the meantime
Yeah.
until it's needed there. Whereas that robot arm that would be dedicated to it is just going to sit there and it's not used. It's
Right.
not deployable, which is the problem. So
Right.
that's sort of the utility of having a mobile humanoid bot platform is the fact that it's not a specialist, it's a generalist. It can
Mhm.
do a lot of these different things. And so long as it can do it within the prescribed cycle time, then that's fine. It doesn't have to be super, super fast. So long as it's able to keep up with whatever all the other operations are around it, that's good enough. And again, if it could just get itself to the next station on time, that's great.
So overall, having watched the video, now done a couple of different videos with Herbert, with me, and others, maybe even already today, how do you think about where they are in the process? Was this a major step in your opinion compared to what we knew?
Yeah, I think so. And I have the feeling that they haven't revealed everything.
Oh yeah,
This is just what they're ready to show. So we know it's Cato Road because it's the batteries and that's close to Palo Alto. I don't think it's down in Giga, Texas. I know they have a battery line down there, but more than likely it's there. Um, and they're just testing out all the different features that they need to have done to get it up and going. Better walking, the ability to go upstairs. Still wondering when they're going to crank up the speed. What's the hold up on that, or whether they are just kind of sandbagging right now and not giving us an actual idea. But it's nice to see that how the charging is done, because remember, that was always a big question out there, like where's the plug located? And as we can see, we now know where the plug is located, and it's not a standard plug. They came up with what more than likely might be a new standard. Who knows whether that's going to be for other humanoid bots or bot things like that, or figuring out some sort of charging, because Tesla's really good at that.
yeah,
They thought it through, and there's not a standard plug, and it was hard to tell. You could zoom in on it a little bit, and it reminds me a lot of like USB thumbsticks, which I don't. Let's see, do I have one around or L1 where you had kind of those contacts that were exposed that
right.
would go into the USB port, and it looks like they had two of them on both sides,
Hmm.
either for redundancy or because maybe the way the battery pack is set up is just better for charging. And they also have a good mechanical interface to be able to hang it off. So they thought that thing through, what it was supposed to look like, and they weren't thinking that like, oh, it has to look like a standard plug kind of thing, because most people will tell you, that what those plugs and sockets, they were designed well over 100 years ago,
Yeah,
150 years ago, and a lot of people will tell you those things are like the most dangerous thing. Even though they had like safety considerations in there, there's you could still easily get yourself electrocuted if you have your hands on the prongs at the wrong time. They tried, but there's a better way to do this stuff. And so they probably said, let's go back to the drawing board and think about what we want. Let's come up with something. And this is going to be the way forward. It's not inductive. It's definitely contact. You don't want induction because you're just going to be adding mass to the back of Optimus to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So this way is a much cleaner interface. There's no need for the induction port at all. We can see, it's good, pretty good accuracy to be able to go back there and do it. I'm impressed with the finger strength.
Yeah.
That, again, being able to do that, that's not the way I would lift up a tote and bring it around. I would take, a different way. And again, I think you can all imagine that as I talked you through. Didn't like your forearm muscles suddenly start overheating and you felt a little tension in your fingers, just imagining what that's going to feel like.
Yeah.
So when you see it doing that, it's like, oh, okay. And I always tell everyone, when you look at an industrial robot or anything like that, if it's something that looks hard, it probably is. So like the robot arm is stretched way out there, trying to hold this heavy mass, and you hear the motors and vibrating. It's like, okay, if you have a really heavy weight in your hand like that, and you're trying to hold it straight out, and if it's hard for you, you know what? It's hard for the robot too.
Right.
It's taking a lot of power, and there's a reason why it loses accuracy when it gets out there, especially if it's all straight out and everything is near the singularity position. It's going to be vibrating like crazy. When you bring it back in, suddenly it's a lot easier to lift that weight out. I was like, yeah, exactly, it's the same thing. So
yeah.
If you're looking at that and you're saying, oh wow, I don't like to look at that. It's like, yeah, it's not a good look, and yeah, so that's just a little bit of an aside. So what else did we learn? That they're making progress, and hopefully we get updates more often and don't have to wait for another Wii Robot event to intervene. Because we were getting a pretty good schedule, and I think that kind of threw off the updating schedule because they had to get to that. So maybe we'll see something in another month or two. Maybe we begin to see a preview of Gen 3 by the end of the year. Who knows?
Well, if they're going to start producing them at actual, not scale, at kind of a
It's possible. Let's go back to last year. I think it was like around the end of September, almost around this time, that they showed us an update, and that was, remember, it was doing the logo, the namaste, and all that, and that was the Gen 1 bot.
Right.
And it was picking things up, and then it would fall over and it would correct and do all that. Was like, wow, man, that was just absolutely impressive and stuff like that. And then 2 months later, there's Gen 2, by the way. So suddenly it's like, whoa, wait a minute. So Gen 2 is almost ready around. So that was like almost the last one they put out. So maybe it's the same thing here, is that we're going to see this, and then 2 months from now we'll probably get the Gen 3.
Yeah.
Gen 3 reveal.
All right, Scott, you must be on sensory overload. Sensory overload, 1010. Then you keep calling it MI5?
IFT5.
IFT5 with the rocket landing. Then you had the robot today, and then you had.
And meanwhile, I'm doing you and Herbert between power washing the house after Milton. So it's still quite a cleanup. So that's why my hair is like complete disaster. I didn't have time to do anything because I was just came freshly from like getting all the. Oh man, it's like when a hurricane comes in, just all the debris and the straw just gets thrown against the side of the house, just all sticking there, and it just won't come off on its own. I mean, you're thinking, just a nice rainfall or something like that will wash it down. It's like, no, you gotta get in there and aggressively get it off. And then when you finally get it off, it's all down on the ground now. It's like, oh crap, now what do I do with it? How to move that along. So yeah.
Okay, Scott. Well, as always, thank you for coming in this morning. By the way, you got to supplant CERN because CERN is, of course, on his trip across country. He hasn't checked in with me. I don't. Maybe he
checked in at all. The last thing I heard is that he made it to Texas or something. Almost no interventions.
Yeah,
he was pretty happy, and that's with the Cybertruck. So remember that's FSD is new. We had kind of a discussion in a theory of what was going on with the Cybertruck and why it took so long, and whether you should trust FSD. Because this discussion that John had is like, well, we know how they're doing the training for the threes, the Ys, and S and X's. Like they get the fleet, the people are training, it's learning from that. You get the drivers that's sitting there. But you got this new form factor, which is a cyber cap.
Right.
And, the camera placements are a little bit different, stuff like that. And how do they test this thing out? Because there's no drivers to do the testing.
Yeah.
So they've got some way of being able to map whatever information they have about driving from one vehicle to another. They must be able to, because the S and X are not identical to the 3 and
Right.
Y.
Right.
And one of them has a much better training fleet than the other. So in order to get the same thing, they must already have figured out how you somehow move from one to another, which has slightly different vehicle dynamics and performance and everything.
Yeah.
And do that with the Cybercab. And probably what they did is that FSD was working on the Cybertruck from day one. It just was in shadow mode. And what they needed to do is they needed to validate everything was right. So they needed to get enough miles from the human users for them to say it's safe, and then they turned it on. So, because if you think about it, there's still not that many Cybertrucks out there compared to the rest of the fleet. There can't be that many Cybertruck miles, despite people going to the Arctic and back.
Right. Yeah.
Still, overall, it pales compared to everything else. And is that like, that's all the training data you need? Or it seemed to me it was like probably more of like just validating that it's behaving the way you expect, everything, little modifications. And then that probably is that, we validated that this being able to transform from one body style to another works. Whatever the math is that they're doing for that is working and working fine, which means we can trust it in the Cybercab, and we don't have to actually have people driving the Cybercab around, because it doesn't have a wheel. It's just not going to have a steering wheel. It's not designed to have one. So I don't know how you validate it otherwise. But yeah, the last I heard is he made it there, and I'm not sure why he didn't leave like a day or two sooner. He could have made it down to Hype, because his first stop was Bastrop.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, CERN should have come down to that, but it might have been he was still cleaning up for the hurricane, because he also didn't get power back until I have to look at it. It might have actually been almost during the time of IFT 5.
Wow.
So it would have been, it would have been tough to leave that. And I assume he's going solo and not going with his family, in which case it's like, I'll just leave my family home. And so he had to make sure everything was set. So he's in a better, where he is, I think he's in much better shape than I am.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is, again, so lessons to be learned, which I pointed out to a couple of things. It's like, everyone keeps on saying, it's like, like when you have a hurricane or disaster like this and electricity is out, how the EV is going to recharge. And of course we always say, but you need electricity and to run the pumps. But to run the pumps, you need one other thing. You need the gasoline to pump. And there were just shortages all over Florida of people not having, the stations were closed because they didn't have any gas to pump. And people running out of gas and really panicking that they couldn't get anywhere and everything else. And it was like not just in one spot, it was all over the place. And when I was out there at IFT5, my son told me, don't come back. There's like, the gas stations aren't running. It's just like, until everything gets up, that's when you want to come back. And it's like, okay, so we'll wait till then. And then he's down here visiting me now because they still don't have internet up in Tampa.
Yeah.
So where he is, it's like, it's still knocked out. So it's like, can I come down and borrow your Starlink? Yeah, sure. No problem. So if you want to literally weather these storms, the way to be prepared is to have your backups, and EVs will serve you a lot better, especially if you produce your own gas on your roof.
Yeah, I don't know how interesting it is, but my dad was doing that in the 50s. He had a battery charger repair business. So we had, in our basement at any given time, we usually had 30 or 40 regular car batteries. And so if there was an electrical storm that took out our electricity, he had it all worked out to where he could use
were those sealed batteries? If this is the 1950s, they probably weren't sealed batteries, man. It's like, I hope you guys weren't going down there.
We would be the only.
No, you would have been exposed to some weird chemicals, boiling off of that. Like, the whole house, and you get 50 of those things down there just bubbling away every time they're being recharged. Oh, okay. All right. So
we'd be the only house on the block that had lights.
Yeah. That sounds kind of like our house too. My dad was he was in the Army, so he had a lot of these backup reserve things, and we used to have one of these dynamo generators that we could use, to run the lights on that. And then we also figured out the batteries, and my brothers were turning all our bicycles into electric bikes, using starter motors and lead acid batteries, which were like non-ideal for that application, but we were doing that all the time.
Yep. All right, sir, I will let you go. And thanks as always for coming on real quick and helping us get a better understanding of what it is that we're looking at.
Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.